All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our monthly Concur webinar. My name is David Szymanski. Hopefully, some of you are starting to recognize my voice and kind of get familiar. I work for Phoenix Consulting, and just a little bit about Phoenix is we're a premier provider of SAP products and all various different consulting services. And as you can see on the screen, we offer a real wide range of software products. So here's an overview of what we have. And we have over 250 plus customers and 175 SAP consultants. And we're typically engaged with all the both public sector and commercial enterprise. And then this next slide is an overview of who we are. And we are very proud to say we're a gold SAP partner. What that means is that we have achieved the highest level of competency, experience, in delivering Concur solutions. And we have a very, very strong team, US and globally. And all of our consultants, ironically, are former Concur employees that we have over 15 years plus experience in Concur. This is just a little bit about me. I'm the Concur lead for Phoenix, and I just deliver these monthly webinars along with the configuration, the training, and all the different developmental type of materials. So today is going to be a very, very interesting topic. It's really discussing the primary configuration of Concur. What does that really mean? So there's primary and then there's secondary. Primary is the mission critical things that must get done during the configuration of the scoping of the project in a timely manner. The secondary things are added on things that are not such mission critical as the timing, such as building audit rules, receipt requirements. When we go through an implementation with you, when Phoenix does an implementation, we gather the business requirements, and based on your business requirements, that's how we put the pieces together. And what we want to tackle is the primary configuration, which starts with list management, groups, forms and fields, workflow, the policies, accounting administration, expense types, and then payment types. These are the things that when we do a configuration or an implementation, we're focusing on these components first to actually get your system ready to go so you can validate it and test it. And then we'll have secondary things that we'll add on after these are completed. So the very, very first thing is list management. And what does that truly mean? List management is the creation of all your lists, and that could be your financial information. That could be anything other than financial information. It's drop-down lists right here, and we have a single, which is a simple list, and then a multi-level list, which is a connected list. It's a relationship. So how list management appears in the system, because this is going to be more of a live interactive demonstration, is in here. So what happens is within Concur, you as a customer, you have what we call restricted access or unrestricted access. Unrestricted access means that you have full carte blanche to your system. You're able to do configurations. You're able to change groups and create groups and build policies and work with your workflow. There's a series of steps that you need to acquire to get the unrestricted access. But there's restricted access too that gives you some capability, but not the full unrestricted access. List management is that it's for both. So when you have the role or assignment to you, when you click under list management under here, it's going to give you all the various lists, as you can see. Now, Concur works with a global template, and that global template is pre-configured and predetermined of certain things, and a lot of it is VAT configuration. So this list that you see is out of the box, and some of this is configurable. Some of this, as you can see, may never ever be used if you're not dealing with a VAT country. You're not going to be dealing with any VAT. The word level means one is that simple list, and anything other than the number one means it's a multi-level list or a connected list. So this means this is a 4-level connected list. These are all simple lists. So if you needed to build a list, and why would you want to build a list? Various different reasons. After your site gets configured, you have the access to this. Maybe you want to build a list and you want to add something called, departments. So to do so, click New, and you want to name the list. A best practice, a standardization for Concur is always to put an asterisk in front of the list name. And the reason why that is because it takes that list and it navigates it to the top of the list just for filtering. It just makes it easier to identify. So if I needed to call this department, the default search says text, and then the code says code and text. What this means is, how do you want to see this? Do you want to see the code, the text first, or the coding first? Best practice is just to leave this alone because this is what Concur recommends. However, you can change this if you needed to, if you want to see the code first. So you want to create the name, and then down below here, or up here, we're going to click Save. We're going to lock in what we're just creating. And now we want to put some values inside of here. So clicking New will navigate to the right-hand side of that name and that code. That code is reflective over here. So we want to look at the text first. So the name, I'm just going to call this accounting. And it needs to have some type of code associated to accounting. And, it could be all caps, it could be small, lowercase. I could have a code, I can spell out the word. And as I click Save and Add, I'm going to click Done so you can see what you've just completed. But here's our Word department. So you can see it's simple, singular. And now in your world, if you are in this situation, this is exactly how it would be presented to you. You can add more values in here. So let's say I want to create one called Finance. And then I can just keep clicking Save and Add, and then I'll do one more. And then I would go ahead and create as many as I want, or you can remove these, or you can change these. And once this is done, you would click Done at the bottom right. Once the list is created, as you can see right here, we just did this and it says number one. If you made a mistake and you want to start all over, you can simply come right in here and click Remove. But be very mindful. This is not your situation because you have data flowing through your site. So for example, if I was to click, reference codes or projects, you notice this remove button is no longer there. It's locked down. If for some reason this was never going to be applied and you can't remove it, it's perfectly acceptable. A best practice for Concur is putting the word Z not used in front of it. And all that does is just bring it down to the very bottom. It's still going to be there, but it's kind of dormant. You're not, able to use it. There are other ways too. If you needed to import, you can, let's say you had 100 lists or 100 departments, you can click into the import and generate a link. This is an Excel template. And when you click on this, you can go ahead and use this as your master template. And as you notice, it says name and code. So the system is looking for that code. That code is really important. You can say this to your computer and then you can import it right in the UI. That's simple. Now, sometimes, you might need to create a multi-level list or a connected list. So if this one says 4, that's a multi-list. So same idea. We're going to click New. And let's say we're going to do one called, Cost Center and your division together. That's a multi-list. So I would put an asterisk in front of the naming convention. And this is all configurable the way you like it to appear. I'm just putting in as a best practice cost center / division. However, you can create that however you like and click save. It's the same idea, but we need to add the connection to it. So clicking new, we'll put in, I'm going to put 001. This is my cost center, and I'm going to use the same code 001. And I'm going to click done again so you can see cost center and division. So here it is, cost center division. Our goal is to have this either be 2, 3, 4, and there's no limit. Reality is 4 and 5 is a high tier of a connected list. If you start getting into more higher levels than that, which you can, you really need to see why. Why is it so much? Concur can handle it, but typically 4 is at the top end of a connected list. So here, cost center division, I want to add my second tier or my second level to it. So here I got 001. Let's add just a few more so you can see the flow of that. I'll do 002. And I'll do 003. So these are my cost centers. Now to add a division, I want to highlight where I want that second tier to go. So highlighting 001, I'm going to click new. And I'll get this confirm action. And this is a good response. And it asks me this question. Are you sure you want to convert this single level list into a multi-level list? Yes, I am sure. So now that's going to give me the ability to go ahead and put my divisions. So let's say it's 1, 2, 3. Let's say here on this cost center, click new. And then maybe on this particular one, I want to highlight it, click new, and then I'll put my division in here. So let's say it's 5, 4, 7. And save and add. And click done at the bottom right. And now you'll see my cost center division. It is a 2-level connected list. And within here, I can make any modifications. You can see my first levels. And then now if I needed to open that up, I can see my second levels. This is exactly how your site would get configured. Is we need to identify these lists, which would always generate your financial information, such as this particular one, SAP hierarchy. And then anything else that you want. It could be projects, it could be a question, yes, no, a drop down, anything that has any type of list associated to it. Okay, I'm going to move on. This kind of explains list management as the #1 primary configuration. And whether your site's configured by, or you're maintaining your site, you're always going to be in list management because that's always evolving all the time. The next area is groups. And groups is think of groups as the differentiator. What makes this one group different than another group? Groups are associated to the user, to the end user. So I've seen, customers with 2 groups with a huge deployment. I've seen customers with 20 groups. It varies. There's not a right or wrong answer. It depends on, what you're trying to accomplish. One of the main things is when you try to establish a group, you must go into the employee group ID. And this right here, guys, is in list management. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. And you only create groups when the information is truly different. In other words, let's say we create a group called travel and we create another group called non-travel. Maybe we want to set up an audit rule or maybe a receipt requirement. If you're in the travel group, you're allowed to submit an expense report up to $5,000, or you can build audit rules around that. So it's anything that's differentiating one group of users to another group of users. What happens quite often, and it's very common, especially those who have the unrestricted access to the system. You know, they may have it and maybe 4 months down the road, they need to do some configuration and they're thinking of groups and they'll go in, you know, common sense says, let's go to the group configuration. And if you do that, this is where your groups reside. And if you click new, thinking you want to create a group, you'll never be able to do it because it's not here. You must, that's why in this PowerPoint, I put in here, you must create the group in the employee group ID first. So what does that mean, truly? Back to list management, our #1 primary configuration, employee group, and it says, all your sites will see that. You'll see this in your site as well. Do not change contact client support because this, if you make a change in here and it's not accurate, it does impact the entire system. So you want to be very cautious that you really truly know what that means and how it impacts your system. So inside of here, I want to highlight this and modify, and I'm going to create my 2 groups called travel and non-travel. And I'm going to save and add, and I'm going to add another one called non-travel. I'll put NT for non-travel, save and add. So as you can see, I can build as many groups as I want in here, but we must go to list management first. And then when you're satisfied, you want to click done at the bottom right. Now, yes, you can go to the group configuration and build out those 2 additional groups, travel and non-travel. Clicking new, you'll get this little global envelope with a little drop down. Now from here, you will see your 2 groups that you just created. And so here's travel, whereas before I didn't see that because it needed to be created in list management first. So underneath travel, I'm going to click done. And now I need to build this. So in other words, what are we calling this group? We're going to call it travel. We're going to follow the exact naming convention as this. And there's a couple things that you need to put in here. I'm not going to go into all the granular detail of this, but one of the main things is cash advance. So if you're thinking or your company does do cash advance, it's group aware. In other words, you can have cash advance for 1 group or 2 groups. You can segregate those groups. It doesn't have to be for the whole entire organization, but it's a twofold thing. You have to have the cash advance workflow identified. And then some form, usually if it could be on your, maybe if you're doing request, it would be on your request form, or if it's expense, has to have a form attached to the workflow. However, the individual, the user in their profile must have a cash advance account code associated to it. So if I had 500 people in 1 group, question you want to ask yourself, do you want 500 people to do cash advances? And if that answer is no, you only want 10 people or half that, this must be activated in the group configuration. As you can see, I would click save. And I got a warning, and I did this on purpose because the system helps you identify. It says you must select an attendee list for this group first. So it's helping you identify some of the things you have to put in here. So I need to select a default attendee list. This all comes here with when you have the unrestricted access to your system to understand, you know, the groups. So here's my travel, and I'm going to do the other one called non-travel. So I'm going to click new. I want to identify non-travel. And maybe this one doesn't allow cash advance. I still need to put a form attached to it. And in this particular example, if I click save, I'm going to get a warning because I have to put something in here. So if I click save, you must select a cash advance form. So even though I'm not doing cash advance, my answer is none. And then some type of form, even though I'm not doing it, then I can click save. It's a two-step process. Here is in the expense tab, it's creating the group and the function of that group. Here, this tab called employee is where you're attaching and creating that group, and you're attaching that group to the employee profile. For those who maybe went through other courses of mine that I've taught before, I've always showed this configuration relationship diagram. It's a one-to-one relationship, one group for one user. That's where this comes into play. So when I click new, same idea. I want to select my group, travel. And now I need to identify the group name. I'm going to call it travel as well. And here it is. This is my employee form, my employee profile. And then now I want to attach it to whatever one I have. So I'm going to call it Phoenix Employee Information. That's where your financial information is housed at, is it the employee form. Very rarely do I ever see this. I've only done this maybe once or twice in my entire career. Allow employees to edit their default approvers. If you cannot source the data for your default employees, that's why you would check that. But I would really caution you to do anything like that, because you don't want employees changing their default employee managers. However, if there may be situations, if there are, then that would be checked. And then I'll do one more. I'll click new, and then I'll select non-travel group. Same thing. You want to keep that name the same identical name as that, so it's consistent. And then we want to identify the form. And then we'll click save. So the group is the differentiator. Anything that's differentiating one group from another to another to another, you can have as many groups that you want. And it's a two-step process, building in the expense tab of the functionality of that group, and then taking that group and attaching that group to the employee profile. Okay, so that's group configuration and the functionality of it. Forms and fields. Probably 45% of configuration is in forms and fields. I can have a 3-hour seminar on forms and fields alone, which obviously I'm not going to do that, but there's a lot of depth with forms and fields. You have an employee form, an expense report or invoice report header form, or a request header form. Tremendous amount of functionality there. Expense entry form, an allocation form, and the word org unit. Org unit is capturing your financial data, your financial string. And then custom fields is anything other than that, such as a job number, a project, a question. Functionality, though, org units and custom fields operate and behave exactly the same. There is no difference. Within Concur, in the global template, you have Concur provides 6 org units. And then depending on the employee form, report header, allocation, whatever it may be, there could be 20, there could be 40, there could be, various different types of custom fields available to use. If you ever ran out, which is I've never had close, but very rarely would you ever run out of custom fields. But if you did, you can't repurpose those fields. So you want to be very mindful how you apply these custom fields to wherever, whether it be a report header, entry form, allocation, or so forth. So in the system, in Concur system, forms and fields, now this is an unrestricted access. If you don't have unrestricted access, you won't be able to see, you'll be able to see some parts of this, but not the full functionality of it. So we have an employee form, the report header form, entry form, and we have an allocation form and other forms. These tabs here are all different functions: fields, connected lists, conditional fields, all various different types of functions within forms and fields. So just for educational purposes and for this particular training, we're going to go right into the employee. And you notice I have two forms, one called Canada and one called Phoenix Employee Information Form. It's big, it's bold, and it's blue. And see, I can tell in this middle section, if I go to this tab, it's more finite. It's in black. It has different functionality. This middle tab, big, bold, and blue. Fields are your org units and any custom fields. So in this employee form, we've got there's 20 custom fields we can use, and there's 6 org units. Many of these things are pre-configured already in the global template. So earlier in list management, I created that one called departments. So I'm going to keep it very simple. Would I use a org unit or would I use a custom field? Well, I only can use what's available to me. So these are all being used, 1 through 4. If I scroll down a little bit, there's 5 and 6. Is a department considered a financial piece of information? That's determined by you and your own company. If it is, you can use an org. If it's not, you can use, a custom field that happens to be available. But functionally, they all operate exactly the same. So I'm going to use custom number 5. It's available to me. It's a text field. I'm going to double click inside this particular field, and I need to name it. So there's a few steps I'm going to go through. I'm going to put an asterisk before my field name, custom 5, and I'm going to call this department. The data type. That's really key. Is it a text field? No, it is not. Is it a boolean? That's a little checkbox if you wanted to put in your employee form. Is it a date? A whole number? None of these apply. It is a list because it's a simple list that I created in list management, or numeric or text. So we're going to identify the list. Right here is the number one thing that customers will blow right past this. It will allow you to save it, and you're going to go back and recheck your work, and you're never going to see the list because it needs to be identified as what list. My default list, it's looking at list management. And now I should be able to scroll down here. And once you get familiar with this, you'll be able to identify what you just created, and that is department. So it's a list. It's identifying that list in list management called department. And now what do you want the employee role to do? Do you want your employee to modify it on the employee profile? Probably not. You'd probably want to leave it as a read-only for the employee or hide it from the employee. You don't want your employees changing defaulted financial information on your employee profile, that's for sure. So, read-only is probably a good selection. The administrator, yes, you do want them to be able to make modifications. So in this case, I'm going to click Save. And I just created it. There it is with the asterisk, department, list, and it's on my employee form. So if I go to the big, bold, and blue tab called Form Fields, here's my Phoenix employee information. I also have one called Canada. But if I open up this little plus sign, all of this is pre-configured. I did not have to change any of this. The only thing that I added is if there's anything, my financial information. But how would I add my department on here? I have to tell the system to add it. So I'm going to highlight maybe here. I could highlight here, wherever I want it to go. So highlighting it, it turns blue. And if you must highlight that, then I want to add my fields. Clicking add, I'll be able to find my custom 5, add it, and there it is at the bottom. And now I just want to make this look good aesthetically. I want to clean this up a bit. So I'm going to double click in this, and I want it to say the word department. So visually, the administrator is going to see the word department, not the word custom 05. I'm going to show this on the report header, and then I'm going to proxy into a user so you can see the result of how that truly works. So the word department is on my employee form now, right? So I want to replicate that, and I want to put that or copy that into the report header. So I'm going to select a different form. I'm going to go up to my expense report header form. And you can see a lot of this is out of the box from the global template, but the idea is the same. I want to go to my fields. I want to take whatever is available to use. And I'll take custom number 13. And I want to follow the same identical way that I was just using that logic. Custom 13, I'm going to call it department. The data is a list. My default list, looking for list management. So I want to click this little drop down here and then move down to the bottom. Here's your department that we just did. And the most important thing is now we need to think, what am I trying to capture? Think of this as you, as the end user, going to do an expense report, and you want that department to copy from the employee profile where it's housed. And then when they're creating an expense report, you want that word department to be a drop-down list. So the value is copying it down. We're going to copy that information, and where's the source? The source of that copy down is my employee profile. And then what are we copying down on the employee profile is my custom number 5 department that I just created. Now here is called access rights. Employee modifiable. Do you want them to change that? Maybe you do. You know, maybe you want to allow them to do that, or maybe it's just read only. The choice is up to you. So I click save. Same thing. My department, custom 13 is here, but I want to attach this 13, custom 13 department. I want to attach it to the form, and I want to put it on my Phoenix report information. So this is big, bold, and blue. You could always remember that. And this is the form when you see it visually like this. If it was like this, it's a little bit finite and black. So forms and fields is where you want to attach that field to this particular form. I'm going to click Phoenix and report information. And then maybe I want to put it right after the word policy. So I'm going to highlight the word policy, add, so highlight and add. And then I want to find custom 13. And then I want to clean this up a bit. So you, as the user, when you're coming in, you just see the word department, and it's copying down from the employee, and it's modifiable. So to see the result of that, I'm going to proxy as a user. And you'll see the results instantaneously of what I just did. So if I start a report, this is going to give me the ability to say, select what policy. So we'll get to that in a moment. But here's my Phoenix policy. I'm saying no, not travel allowance. And here's my department. These are other things that I've done with other types of demonstrations, billable, yes, no, but this is all coming from a list. So this is what I just created, accounting, finance, and marketing. So that shows you that this department is copying down from the expense employee profile. So org units capture financial information, custom fields capture anything other than that. Operationally, behaviorally, they act exactly the same. And then the copy downs, everything starts at the employee form. It goes into the report header. It could copy down into the expense entry if you choose to. Lastly, everything should copy down. We, Concur, Phoenix, will always configure it down to the allocation level. It has to be done that way. whether you're doing it or not, it's got to be configured down to the allocation level all the time. And that's the natural flow of a copy down from an employee all the way down into the allocation form. Okay, workflow. And if anybody has any questions, I'm kind of monitoring. We got a large group. You're free to ask any questions at any given time. You don't have to hold, to the end or anything like that. Anything comes to mind, please feel free to ask any questions. So workflow is the routing, the routing of where you want this to go. All expense reports are going to go through a step of that workflow. It could be simple. It could be complex. It could be various different things that you're using. It could go to an external validation to maybe validate funds and grants. Make sure you're selecting the correct funds and grants first before you can process it through. You can have audit rules as an exception attached to a workflow. In other words, if you're going through your life cycle of your expense report and you trigger an audit rule, that audit rule exception could be linked to the workflow of the way you want it to route to. So actually right here, exceptions generated by audit rules can be evaluated by that workflow. Where that looks like in the system, I'm going back to me as the administrator with the unrestricted access, is in here. So list management is number one, groups, forms and fields, workflow down below here. Out of the box, Concur provides good predetermined workflows. One of that is called simple one-up workflow. I'll use this one. That means it's the most natural, simplest workflow. You submit your expense report, it goes to your default manager. That manager either can approve it or send it back. Once they approve it, it goes to the expense processor. So inside of that workflow, there's an approval timeout. So if you submitted it to your approver, your manager, this is after 5 calendar days. You can change this to whatever you like. It could be 7, it could be 10. After that 7th day or 10th day or whatever day you determine you want it to be, what it will do, it will take it out of that approver's queue and upline it to that approver's queue. And it'll keep on going up the chain until it reaches the highest level of your organization. And you don't want to be on that list. So all these things should be taken care of. Email reminders will remind that approver you've got expense reports in your queue to approve. So there's 3 things. This general information is a lot, which we're not going to go into all of that. But if you ever have a cost object hierarchy, that's where that has to be identified in here first. But next is that natural flow. This is you. You're submitting the report systematically. It goes to your manager, expense approver. Then it routes to the expense processor, which is the last stage of that workflow. And then the system takes over for validation. Step 2. Step 3 is if you want to build in any skip steps. Maybe we don't want it to go to the manager. We want to skip the manager on some type of condition. We can build a workflow condition in here. Or maybe we don't want it to go to the processor. There's various different type of skip steps we can build inside of a workflow. That's the most natural one. Grandfather, kind of a weird name, but that's what it is in the global template, is really a sequential and ascending workflow. In other words, it's going to your default manager, then it's going to route to that person's default manager, then to that default manager based on signing authority. So inside of this workflow, as you can see, there's levels, predetermined 5 levels. You can adjust this. You can remove, 4 and 5. I can remove them, if it's not necessary to have that many levels. But the core product of Concur will have 5 levels, and the role says expense approver. So what this is doing, it's going up the chain to the default approvers based on a dollar signing authority, And then it's going to have naturally born skip steps inside of that workflow once it reaches that level. So in other words, let's say you have $5,000 and you submit it, it goes to your manager. That manager only has $500 signing authority. It will route to your manager, then it will go up the chain until it reaches the dollar signing authority. Some companies say, well, why is it going through so many steps? If that person doesn't have authority for 500, why is it going to them in the first place then? Well, that's because maybe there's budgets or they need to be accountable for certain departments or something. So they want to monitor that. If not, that's a different type of workflow called authorized approver. And the functionality of that is completely different. And the role is called authorized approver. So in this case, let's say it was $5,000. The ones who have $500 signing authority, it won't even route to them because they're not part of that table. They're not authorized based on that signing authority. There's a lot of other topics regarding workflow to get into too as well. I'm just kind of brushing, the very surface of this to discuss this and all the different details. There's cost object approvers based on when you allocate. So if that financial information, that 4-level list was allocated, it could burst to many different cost object approvers as it relates to workflow. Policy. So policy is, people get that confused. When you say the word policy, naturally you're thinking adherences or governance or something. You have an expense policy or a travel policy. Policy within Concur is a container of information of how the expense report's going to behave. And you have one group assigned to a policy. And inside a policy has 3 major functionalities, and that's I always put the acronym FEW, F-E-W. That's your forms, your expense types, and lo and behold, your workflow. So in the policy of Concur, out of the box, the global template has country-specific, as you can see, there's 2 pages of all different countries. This is supported for the VAT. If you're not a VAT country, which the United States is not a VAT country, then that would be in the US policy, because all these other policies have expense types and forms attached to it that does the VAT calculation. Years ago, when the global template wasn't around, there was a whole configuration for VAT, but now with the global template, all that guesswork is taken out of it because it's already pre-configured. In other words, if I was to take Belgium, I'm just taking that arbitrarily. I can take Austria. It doesn't matter what country I take. And I wanted to look at the expense types in that country, which is pre-configured. The form that you see here does not mention the word VAT because everything's assumed it's a VAT country, VAT, value added tax. However, if I do take Phoenix, or if there's a US expense policy, and I go to the expense types, you're going to see the word non-VAT because that's a non-VAT country. Inside of the policy, we'll have your expense report header form. That's FEW, F. It will have your expense types, what you just saw just a few seconds ago. And then it's going to have importantly, is your workflow. So if I wanted this policy to have a different workflow, I could select maybe the grandfather one, or I can select whatever policy I want to attach it to. Here's one with a cost object approver baked into it. And then lastly, and you notice there's no red bar here. These are required. The allocation form is not a requirement. If you determine we don't want our employees to do allocations, that's perfectly fine. In the policy, we would have to say none. And by doing that, that means the end user won't even have the button to select allocation. There will be no teaser there for them even to select it. if you want to do allocations, you need to tell the system, we're going to select the allocation form. So the policy is the driver of the functionality, forms, expense types, and the workflow. Expense types are so large, it's in its own little tab all by itself. And this will show you what's either active or inactive for all the various expense types. As you can see, there's a lot of them. And a lot of these are country-specific expense types. In a moment, we're going to talk, we only have about 10 more minutes to go. So I'm going to kind of breeze through this a little quickly, but ask questions. If you have any questions, please ask them away. You'll see some of the expense types. Okay. Accounting, you would have, if you had restricted access, you'll have some visibility to this. You will not have this accounting structure. You'll be able to see your ledgers, but you won't be able to see or build an account structure. What this means is that I want to build a ledger. As you can see, these are all practice ones, SAP, ECC, S/4HANA, all the various different ledgers. Companies may have more than one, they may have several ledgers. To create a ledger in your system with Concur is clicking New. And I want to say, in this case, Oracle. So I'm going to name it Oracle and the code, Oracle. Click Save. It's that simple. It's that simple to identify the ledger. Where the mapping takes place is in this tab called Account Codes. So in other words, if I am in, here's my ledger now, Oracle, here's my expense types. So if it's airfare, I'm going to say it's going to go to 5201. And if it's, maybe something dinner, it's going to go to 7685. I'm just totally making these up. So this is where you're putting in the account code, because the system must have an account code mapped to an expense type. If it is not, the user will get an error, and it will say unexpected account code user lookup, contact your administrator. That's a big fancy name for it. The administrator would go in here and identify that expense type just didn't have an account code mapped to it, and then you can go in here and put that number right in there. And it's based on whatever ledger that you're in. If I go into my employee profile, just so you can see from an administrator's perspective, if I was to click user administration, and I want to find that user that I'm using, I want to look this person up, last name. The one-to-one relationship. Now we'll have the ledger in the user profile. If I look over here, I will see Oracle that I just created. So that person is attached to Oracle. That's the ledger. That ledger is attached to the account code. That account code is attached to the expense type. That all links and ties into what? The policy. So Concur is like a big puzzle. It all has to kind of come together with all these different primary configurational things. Okay, next would be 2 more to go is expense types. So expense types, primary configuration, it's a 5-step wizard that will take you through the process. So let's say your company, doesn't want to use what is available, or maybe wants to add specific. I want to click New. And it's going to go through 1 all the way to your accounting. So we want to name it. So let's say we're going to call this the expense type. We'll call it, I don't know, desk. I'm just making that up. We're going to have an expense type called desk. The spend category is whatever this would fall into in this for reporting purposes. If nothing is here that makes sense that you wanted, like desk, I have no idea where desk would be. I can always put other. But is it under any of the other categories? you can filter through any of these to find out. And then has this a parent means what category is this going to fall under? These are the categories, and you can create your own categories too. So maybe desk is going to fall under the category of other. So you as the end user, when you're creating your expense report and you want to select desk, it will be under 08, other as the parent. So step one, this is how it links together. Step two, what policy do you want that to be attached to? So you notice this is all grayed out. I can say I want that to go to the Phoenix policy, or I want it to go to the Canada policy, or any policy. You can dictate whatever policy you want. So in other words, when I create this expense type, if I go to the Phoenix policy, it will be active. If I was to go to this Canadian policy, it will be there, but it will be inactive. It will be there just dormant until you want to activate it. So Phoenix policy is US centric. I need to select a form, ties back to forms and fields. And when you get familiar with this, you'll get very familiar with all these different, fields or forms to select. I want to select a form called non-VAT, because this is US. Business purpose is the best choice. That means business purpose is a required field. So I'm linking these forms to the policy, step 2. Step 3 and 4, we're going to blow right by because we're not doing a calculation formula. That's a little bit more advanced. And then next is if there's an attendee, desks have nothing to do with attendee, so I can leave this completely alone. When I click next again, now I can find my Oracle. That's my ledger I just created. Here's my expense type. And now I can put in my account code. And then click done. If I come down here alphabetically, if I look at the word desk, spend category is other, it's under 08 other, which is the parent. And if I was to sign in as an end user or proxy, I would be able to see that expense type in that policy. But I do want to show you real quick before we conclude, if I was to go into the Canada or any other policy, and I look for this, I will see desk. Desk will be there because once you create it, it's created throughout. But as you can see, it's inactive because I didn't select it. If I wanted to select it, I can go ahead and go back there, select it, and then it would be active. And I would want to make sure it's selected to the right form, because if you're doing a VAT calculation, you want to make sure it does not say non-VAT. And then before I go to the last topic, and then we'll conclude, is the group configuration. I'm going to toggle back to that for 1 second, because that group, non-travel that I created, or travel, this is where you link it to the policy. So travel, I want to say, I want to look and I want to find the policy I want that to be active for. So all this word called Z not use is a good standardization to use for Concur best practice, because I know it's not being used, but now I can say I want it active for the Canadian policy, but I really don't. I want it to be in the Phoenix, and I want that to be defaulted. So I want to go up here and uncheck Canada. So I'm attaching that group to the policy. Lastly, last topic is the payment types. So there's out of the box payment types of credit cards and then cash out of pocket. So payment types are here. If I want to create a brand new payment type, I have American Express, various different payment types. To create a new, you can't really modify, or you can't really, once data is flowing, you can never remove a payment type. But if I want to create a brand new one, I'll click new. And maybe this is a Visa, The description is Visa credit card. And then the payment type code. That right there is what's driving the function of how that's going to behave. So there's various different codes associated to it. Individual bill, company paid, offsets applied or not used. We can talk about that later, but typically offsets not used. IBCP means individual bill. You've got your credit card out in the field, you're using your credit card, and then when you come back to do your expense report, it's going to get reimbursed, the company paid. It's going to go automatically, electronically transferring to your checking account or to the American Express or Visa credit card. So individual bill, company paid, or individual bill, individual paid, IBIP, where you, the end user, are responsible for paying it. So it depends on, what you want to do. And then once you click save, we don't want that to be a test. You created or Concur did, Phoenix did, created your payment type. And then lastly, in the group configuration, just like we did with travel, we linked it to the policy, and now we would link it to the payment type. So here I want to be able to select Visa. I can default that, and then I just linked my group to the policy, and I linked that policy and group to the payment types. Here was the accounting information, creating the ledger, mapping the expense types. Here were the expense types. I took you through all the different 5 stages to create that expense type. And then lastly was the payment types of what to identify as your payment method. So last place here is questions. Any questions before we conclude? Anything I can help you with? Okay, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'm going to take that as silence is good. Can everyone still hear me? I want to double check, just make sure.
Yes.
Okay, good deal. Okay, so lastly, if you don't mind, there's a little QR code if you want to scan that. We're just looking for your input and any topics in the future you think you would like to have a Concur webinar on, just I'll look at that, and then that's how we get these Concur webinars on a monthly basis from your feedback. So I hope you found this informative and somewhat entertaining, and you liked it. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me anytime. And I'll follow this up with the PowerPoint and the recording for you too, so you always have something to go back to in case you have any other questions. I appreciate your time, everyone. I know time is very valuable to people, so I appreciate your time you spent, and keep in contact with me if I can help. I'm happy to do so.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.